We are still the Ways and Means Committee. It is Thursday, May 15th. It's 9:39, and we are going to talk about some school construction language with the Treasurer's Office and the Bond Bank. Ashlyn, if you want to join us, thank you. So Ashlyn came in and talked to us about this along with Michael from the Bond Bank right after we voted 454 out. And it's a very important substantive technical change, I would say. And I just want to make sure that it's not clear if Senate Finance will have time to get their heads around it. And so just wanted folks to be aware of it as we're sort of taking next steps with 454. Floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. For the record, my name is Ashlyn and I'm the Director of Policy in the State Treasurer's Office. When I was here in your committee back in April, we had spoken generally about sort of the Treasurer's role in developing this new iteration of the State Aid for School Construction program. And we had also shared with you some recommended language changes to that school construction section of the bill. The recommended changes two parts, and I can definitely share it, but I also I know that Michael Gahn is on the Zoom, and I want to make sure that if I say anything incorrect, he can jump in and correct me. So maybe we can talk first and then parse out the language if that works for the committee. But the language accomplishes two things. The first is that it adds a sentence that states explicitly that the debt incurred by school districts as part of this new state school construction aid program is not to be considered to be net tax supported debt of the state and not subject to the full faith and credit of the state of Vermont. The second piece of the language establishes the bond bank firmly as the fiscal agent. The bond bank is already acting as the fiscal agent for all but two schools in Vermont, Burlington and Winooski. It was the recommendation of the School Construction Task Force that operated in 2023 and issued a report to the legislature in 2024 that the bond bank be the fiscal agent for any new state aid for school construction program. That is for a number of reasons. One, it mirrors the model in Rhode Island that we are seeking to sort of replicate here in Vermont that has successfully avoided new school debt being counted as net tax supported debt in their state. The other reason is that overall, we believe that it will lower costs significantly for the state because schools will be required to issue their bonds as part of the larger bond bank pool, which in turn leverages lower borrowing costs as a result of the bond bank's credit rating and standing. And also the bond bank being responsible for facilitating the repayment of that debt service can also monitor the market for refinancing opportunities over the life of those bonds in a way that school districts are not really accustomed to managing in terms of their debt at a high level like that. We're also talking about an environment in which this program operates where there are potentially brand new school districts that will not likely have ever gone out to bond as an entity before. And also their financial and business offices, I don't think that we really know yet exactly how those are going to be made up, what sorts of expertise is going to live there. And all of that expertise, all of that institutional knowledge already lives at the bond bank. And so I think that one of the difficult aspects of this language for Senate Finance is that the bill as currently written sets up the state aid for school construction special fund. And the bill as currently drafted would have the awards being transferred from that special fund to the districts themselves in a direct fashion. If the bond bank functions as the fiscal agent, that special fund would actually be transferring money to the bond bank, who would then funnel those funds down to the school districts upon payment of their debt service. That's a critical tool that actually strengthens the state intercept mechanism and the bond ratings credit status. The state intercept is a credit enhancement tool that the bond bank will use to again leverage the lowest borrowing costs possible for this program. So it's an ecosystem that is knit together very carefully. Not everything that is really intuitive about how it would work. But this would be the closest that we can get to the Rhode Island model while leveraging institutions that already exist in Vermont for the sake of efficiency, and overall protect the state's net tax supported debt. Now, I think that there's also, a question about timing, right? And the question is, why is it so important to have this protective amendment incorporated into the bill at this stage when there are still so many things yet to be determined about our reformed education environment in general and also the school construction program? And for the treasurer's office, we look at this in an environment where we are being evaluated by the rating agencies on a particular schedule. So we're evaluated by the rating agencies when we go out to bond. If we haven't gone out to bond, we are evaluated at least annually, usually by Moody's, S&P, and Fitch ratings. It's very likely that we will have a ratings evaluation, and prior to the beginning of next session or prior to any changes that could be made to edit this language in another session, based on work that's done over the summer. And the rating agencies, even though that may be our intent, your intent as a body, our intent as a treasurer's office to work with you all to accomplish those goals, the rating agencies will evaluate what is in existing law, what has been signed into law. And so I think that just makes it more critical that we incorporate this technical change at this stage, even with the understanding that, we all want to do more work to engage, and that there's an advisory body or a committee, I forget exactly what it is in the bill, that's going to do a lot of work over the summer, that the treasurer is a member of. But the timing of this and having this in the language from the outset is crucial. So I want to make sure that I'm speaking to what's most helpful to the committee. And I don't know if talking more about the importance of protecting the state's net tax supported debt position is important, or whether maybe.
I imagine we all agree that protecting the state's credit rating is very important.
Yeah.
Percentages of debt is very important. So I think, and I understand there's sort of like there's some very specific language, and then there's sort of conforming changes related.
Yes.
So that, do you want to show us that?
Yes, I will show the very specific language. I think that the changes that will likely need to occur throughout the bill in order to effectuate this change and tie it out throughout the rest of the bill is probably something that legislative council will need to draft, or will work in combination with legislative council to draft. So I'm not really prepared to speak to those other areas. But let me get on the Zoom. I'm sure that Sorsha will let me in, and then I will share.
While you're pulling that up, Ashlyn, can you just tell us what changed between when you met with us in April and now? Because this wording has been around since December.
So the only thing that's changed since I met with you in April is that, we've replaced in our proposed language, we've inserted the actual name of the special fund. But also what's changed is that the prospects of getting this amendment or language in on the Senate side are not as clear, I think, because of their timing constraints and other issues that they're spending a lot of time investigating.
I think it was mostly just that Ashlyn, unfortunately, and neither of us remember who canceled what, but she was here the day after we passed the bill out, and Senate Finance is just working on a lot of other stuff. So I just want to make sure we don't lose the detail. I think JFO is also tracking it. But if it's something that we wind up needing to put on in the committee of conference, I just want the committee to be aware of it. And so we're spending a minute on it.
I think, we've been monitoring the development of this bill all along. We've weighed in on a couple of different points. We've done a lot of work in the background on like different ideas that have been coming about. Like we investigated how payments are made to like municipalities and how like what interest they earn and all of those things. So we've been really engaged in the bill all along. I think this is based on our evaluation of the bill in its entirety, actually really the only change that we're recommending at this point. So I think that's good news. I'll share. Okay, so where am I? So you've seen this presentation before. It has a new date on it. This is what we went over in April, but I'm just looking at the second to last page, which is the suggested language additions. Can you see that? Okay. Perfect. So you'll see in the bold and underlined are the additions. You'll see in paragraph A of the award of construction aid section, we are recommending this change that says that the amount, so you already added the amount shall be awarded annually. That was an edit that we had suggested to legislative council offline when you did have the bill, and that was incorporated. We're further suggesting are subject to annual appropriation and do not constitute a pledge of the faith and credit or taxing power of the state. So that's sort of this reaffirmation language that the debt does not belong to the state, the debt belongs to the municipalities, and this award that the state is making to the districts, sorry, is a proportion of their annual debt service. And that's how the amount is calculated in terms of what they're eligible to receive, but the state is not on the hook for their debt. And that's critical. I think I mentioned last time that I was in here that the state has anywhere between $600 and $700 million of debt outstanding on any given day, depending on timing of debt service payments and bond issuances. And the start of a school construction aid program could easily, I think, based on the scope of need in Vermont for school buildings, add hundreds of millions of dollars per year to that amount. And we really do not want that to happen. It could affect our rating. It would most definitely affect the amount of debt that we would recommend authorizing annually for the capital bill. And so that's sort of the reasoning behind this suggestion in paragraph A. I'll also note that the RIBEC enabling legislation, which is the Rhode Island Health and Educational Buildings Corporation, I think. Their language also has a protective clause that is similar to this one. For paragraph C, this is where we get into the bond bank serving as the fiscal agent of the school construction aid program. Now, with the RIBEC, my understanding is that that institution does a lot of the programmatic aspects of the school construction program that your bill is asking the Agency of Education to do, but they're also set up to do this sort of financial transaction monitoring, going out to bond work. In Vermont, our Agency of Education is not set up to do that work. However, the bond bank is and does. And so in Vermont, these authorities would be sort of bifurcated between these two existing entities. And I think that the Treasurer's Office, the bond bank, and the Agency of Education all agree that that's appropriate. And so this language naming the bond bank as the fiscal agent for the aid program, I think what it does do is, we talked about the bond bank providing timely payment of state construction aid to the districts after receiving a transfer from the school construction aid special fund. In other parts of the school construction section of your bill, it says that the school construction aid special fund makes direct transfers to the districts. That's sort of a more technical change that will have to be inserted in those various other parts throughout the bill in order to tie it out with this addition.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Any questions for Ashlyn?
Not because I understand it thoroughly.
Okay.
I just trusting her that this is the way to go.
Okay.
What are the risks for school districts? Like when they're out in the market trying to, raise capital, what are the risks to districts of doing things this way?
Well, I can let Michael speak to this a little bit more, but I think that doing it this way actually provides a lot of protections for school districts. The bond bank really holds their hands in terms of putting together their bond documents, preparing what we call an official statement to go out to bond for any deal. It would pull together their projects in with other projects. So instead of doing like $20 or $30 million bond, maybe the size of the bond is a couple $100 million that's going out to the market. And so lower borrowing costs are achieved. The bond bank's credit rating is directly tied to the state of Vermont's credit rating. It's benchmarked, I think, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but one notch below or something like to that effect. And so if school districts were to go out and bond on their own right now in Vermont, really Burlington is the only one that is of size and scale to be able to do that and have an independent municipal bond credit rating. Winooski did their really large school construction project through USDA through a different program. And so, I mean, it's a little bit tricky not knowing what the composition of the districts in the future is going to look like. They may or may not be at the scale where they could go out to bond at their own, but I do think that it's accurate to say that it would be unlikely that their credit rating would be as strong as the bond banks, given that it would be a brand new district. I think that the risk to the school districts just generally in having debt that is not backed by the full faith and credit of the state is that, they're going to be responsible for making the entirety of those payments every year over the life of the bond, whether or not there is a state appropriation made. And that's really that's sort of the crux of the matter. It will be incumbent upon the legislature in order to support those districts that are going out to bond in any given year and have gone out to bond previously and received state awards 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, since the inception of this new program, that appropriation comes through to them. Because if it doesn't, they're still on the hook for their debt service. Now, there are a lot of protections built into this network. So one of them is the state aid intercept. I'm not sure, and this is sort of both a protection for the district as well as sort of a con for the districts. But if a district were to not be able to pay their debt service through the bond bank has the power to ask the state treasurer to divert or intercept any other state payments that would be going to the district in order to pay the debt service. Now, that's good in that it prevents the districts from defaulting on bonds, which would be kind of catastrophic. But it would also mean that they would be in a situation where they would have to figure out what to do without those funds coming from the state that would be paying the debt service. The other, kind of backstop here just generally for the bond bank is that the bond bank is supported by the state in the event of them not being able to pay their debt in certain ways. So I think that the only person or the only entity in this whole deal, which is how it really is in all things that I've come across, that makes out well, no matter what happens, is the investors, right? The people who buy the bonds. So, but that's sort of how it is, not just in Vermont, but nationwide. I mean, this is the larger system that we're operating under. So I'm not sure that I really have any suggestions for how to rectify or cover everyone. It's not like Vermont is California or, as far as the impact that our bonds have when we go to sell them nationwide, and we have to play by the rules. We're just not a big enough player to not play by those rules. So both good and bad, right? And I think Michael has his thumb sort of much more on the pulse of the market. But even with all of this market volatility, I think that we have seen that the demand for municipal bonds in the market, particularly Vermont bonds, it is still, the appetite is still really healthy. So that's also good news too, when we're thinking about the need to raise capital for various projects.
And Michael had to leave.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know he's traveling today, so I'll do my best.
Representative Odie and then Meslin.
I have two questions. If the state would not send an appropriation that they have otherwise promised, would the school district, could the school district, would they have the right to bring a cause of action against the state, or is that immunity for the state? The state could just simply not fulfill their.
I think that question is outside my ability as a non-attorney to answer. But the purpose of this language is to state explicitly that this award is subject to an annual appropriation on the part of the legislature, which I think implies that it's uncertain and that the districts know that going in when they go out to bond and choose to participate in this program.
I have another question. Thank you for that. If the districts are clumping together in order to get the better credit rating. Better, well, they're coming to, you said that your testimony was, if the school districts bond on their own, they don't have as great a chance to get a good interest rate as if they do it together, and that your treasurer's office could help them by aggregating the school districts together. So if those school districts aggregate their bond and they haven't, to what extent is their obligation? Could one district have to pick up the failure to pay of another district in there?
No, it's the bond bank goes out to market with a loan pool. But everyone's obligation is their own. Yep. Now the bond bank,
Nobody can.
now the bond bank,
And Michael's
Yes.
back if you wanna.
yes,
Yes, hands up.
his hand is raised. Michael, did you hear Representative Odie's question?
I apologize. On the road today and doing my best to stay in service, but I missed that. I'd like to answer that question. If I could just make a follow-on comment, I'm grateful for Ashlyn for following this closely. It's it's always a little hard if you're not there every day to follow the legislation. So thankful for her comments and her brilliant insight into why this matters to us. The other thing I'd just say that I think you all probably enjoy hearing is that if we serve as fiscal agent, I mean, we're going to be in the middle of this process verifying all the school district debt payments anyway. So we have we're going to bear an administrative burden. And then what we'd be doing is just a lot of duplication of that effort at AOE. So I think we probably reduce the staff time burden at AOE if we serve in this role. And I know that's obviously an important thing given the challenges over there and the huge mandate they have. So I think that's another benefit here. And then there's things in the weeds that make this beneficial in terms of, as Ashlyn mentioned, preserving the state intercept. But I just think at the end of the day, the schools will receive their payments more quickly. The language modifications we've made since the last time we spoke to you, I think are more sensitive to any rating agency's concerns. And then I'd be happy to answer that question that came up that I missed.
So the question, Michael, was if the district's bonds are in the bond bank's loan pool, is there any impact on them if other loans in the pool default?
No, not pre-default or not like, so if that school district is taking out a loan and there's a default, they're fine. They're one of the benefits for using the bond bank is that we go out to the capital markets. You lock in your cost of financing for 30 years or whatever term you're borrowing for, whereas oftentimes with a bank solution, they don't like to go out much longer than 10 years because they want to mitigate interest rate risk. So that rate will be locked in. Now, if there was a default after the fact, we would, probably likely have some sort of rating agency action like negative outlook or downgrade or something like that, in which case, everyone, including municipalities, would bear the cost of that change. We're kind of an all for one for all system. But obviously we do a lot of work administratively to avoid anything that would come close to that. And so that's just another good reason for us to be part of the process.
And also just to highlight this, Michael, it's correct that all but 2 school districts in the state right now anyway already utilize the bond banks or are already participating in loan pools when they go out. Is that correct?
Yeah, for major projects, I mean, there are certainly instances of like equipment leasing or some odds and ends that may not be with us, but yes, for large capital projects, nearly everything other than Winooski and Burlington is with us, and I think we still want to be in the process, regardless of whether they use us for financing, but that would continue to be voluntary. It's just that we know even if someone didn't do their financing with us, we know the right questions to ask of them to verify debt service payments, and are familiar with the overall landscape in terms of talking to paying agents like U.S. Bank or Bank of New York Mellon. So just have a lot of specialized expertise that I think will be helpful in this process.
So that's a critical point. So this language or nuance. So while the bond bank is the fiscal agent for the state aid for school construction program, it doesn't preclude an instance where a district could get more advantageous rate going somewhere else, like USDA, like what Winooski did. I think that unless there's a USDA like component, it's probably unlikely that a more advantageous interest rate sounds somewhere else, but the language provides an opening for a circumstance like that, which I think is important.
Thank you. So the first question that I asked, did Michael have a little bit more of an answer on that, or?
Can you re-ask that question?
All right, so would school districts have the right to bring a cause of action against the state, or is the state immune?
I think Michael's also not a lawyer.
Because the award is subject to annual awarding by the legislatures and the governor. So if they do not award the
Representative
don't
Odie,
need it.
I think Michael's also not an attorney, right?
Alright.
He also represents the bond bank, not the state, so I don't think he can comment on legal liabilities.
But maybe that's a question you could follow up with our.
And I do have a question about, but
Okay.
it is the bond bank question, I think. But
Okay.
Jim was before me.
You have the floor right now.
All right. So I don't remember if it was you who addressed this or not, but when you're repaying a bond, sometimes in the beginning, you have to pay more than middle you pay even more than in the end you pay a little bit less again. I saw that on a chart.
Yeah,
And so I have had someone say to me, it would be nice if we could even those payments. I don't know what that's called. And
Level debt repayments.
level debt repayment. And so what do you have to say about level debt repayment?
well,
We couldn't agree more. We couldn't agree more on for the bond bank. We've proposed a change in H397 that's over in Senate Government Ops, and are optimistic that that language will be included. It results in about a 20% higher first year debt service payment, debt called level principal as opposed to level debt service. So that first year payment is significantly higher, and that stresses the ed fund, obviously.
yeah, the state of Vermont for our own general obligation bond payments, we use a level principal payment system, which, like Michael said, it front loads your highest payments in your early years, unlike where you have a mortgage for your household where it's a level payment where you have the same mortgage and interest every month, but in the early years of your mortgage, you're barely paying any principal, you're just paying interest. State of Vermont kind of does something really different than that, where we pay the same amount of principal every year. I think this language doesn't comment on the structure of debt payments. As sort of financial folks, Michael and I obviously have our preferences as to what is better. But I think that it's probably going to be a significant hurdle anyway for these newly formed districts to get bonds passed for the requisite school construction needs. I'm not sure that you'll want to put that requirement in statute. If the districts want to make level principal payments, they're not precluded from doing that.
That'd be true for Burlington and Winooski right now.
I'm not sure what Burlington and Winooski are doing right now. Michael might
Yeah,
know.
I mean, Burlington has, and I'm sorry, I don't think I ever introduced Michael Gahn, Executive Director of the Vermont Bond Bank, for the record. Burlington has special flexibility under their charter. And there is an opportunity to do level debt service if you authorize a note instead of a bond. So there's already existing workaround in statute, and I think my intuition is that Winooski probably did the latter for historical reasons. And so, yeah, again, H397, we're just trying to level the playing field in a lot of ways.
And we're focused on the school construction language for 44 right now. Oh, okay, yeah. Any further questions for, oh, sorry, Jim?
But there's, I just want to say.
Yeah, I had some questions, but I think through this discussion, you pretty much answered.
Okay.
They began with discussion with Burlington, but we've gone far afield in it incorporated a lot of my questions and answers. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Is that I thought someone said there would be a bigger impact on the ed fund, but based on how the debt is dealt with this, with the debt leveling payment. And so I wonder, if that is true today with those two school districts. I mean, is this a concern that we need to look at for the ed fund sake about these two school districts?
Well, historically, in the way that the ed fund is today, when a district goes out and has a large bond, there is a share of that cost incurred by one district that everyone pays. This
Very much.
bill totally changes that structure, and so I think that there are still a lot of questions and unknowns about exactly what all of these impacts will be, but my understanding is the intent of the new structure is to mitigate some of those inequities.
Very much so. And we also need to figure out what to do about existing debt. And that's going to be a project for next year.
That is going to be
In the
a
summer.
conversation that I think both Michael and I are going to be very engaged on over the summer and next year. And we'll have a significant interplay with this, with a new school construction aid program and what districts are able to take on more debt and what aren't. And as I said, earlier in my testimony, there is still a lot of work to do on this topic. And this amendment is not an answer to all of those unknown questions, but it is a protection for the state in anticipation of ratings reviews that happen between now and the next phase of work on this.
Anything else for Ashley? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael, for,
Thank you.
I know it's very hard to join a call when you're, anyway, thanks for bearing
Yes,
with
thank
us.
you so much. And I'm happy to come back at whenever to discuss this and look forward to working on this over the summer. Thank you all so
Thank you.
much.
So folks, due to various scheduling things, 481 is going to be after the floor, along with S124 and S12. It's tomorrow morning at 9. Thanks.